Okay, welcome everybody. As folks trickle in, of course, I'm going to give some time for folks to get settled. Excited to be with you today. Hopefully folks are excited about back to school in the fall for those of you that are starting, and a new academic year. I know that's true in my world as well, with my own family and starting back to school stuff. There's a lot of trepidation and anticipation, and just acknowledging that. I'm gonna give us a few more minutes before I officially start. I do like oftentimes in Zoom meetings to start with a dad joke. And so dad jokes are wonderful because it makes you guys think a little bit, and you can try to guess the punchline without me giving it away. And we'll start. I'll give you the punchline when we start. So the opening line of this dad joke is actually just the front half of a sentence. It says, talking about the benefits of dried fruits, ... So I'm just going to post it in the chat. Can I? No, I can't. Well, I'll just tell you all, and that way you guys can try to guess the punchline. You can think in your brains about what the punchline of that would be. So again, a dad joke opening line, talking about the benefits of dried fruits, ... And we'll see if y'all can think what the second half of that is.
You're all set now to share. Apologies.
Thank you, friend, for that. Okay, then, chat. Here we go. Everyone, dad joke opening line, talking about the benefits of dried fruits. And y'all can try to guess the punchline. That's a good turnout. Thanks everybody for coming. My name is Amin Azam. I'm going to do the intro when I formally start, just to sort of giving a few minutes more. Will give you time to think. Now, it's easy to look up the punchline, but I'm going to invite you all to not do that because it's a much more creative and tickles your brain and actually sort of, stimulates learning if you try hard to think about what the punchline is here. So if anybody wants to throw in the punchlines, yep, there we go. Some replies are coming into the chat. Feel free to throw in the answers. This one's a tough one. I want to acknowledge that. As you all know, many of you know, dad jokes usually are a play on words or a pun, and that way you're not sort of making fun of anybody or any people or anything like that at all. So in this case, this is playfully making fun of dried fruits. So with apologies to any dried fruit lovers out there who don't like the wordplay. Got like maybe one more minute to see if you can get the let's get the punchline in here. No guesses? Somebody is there. There's some guesses coming in here. Thank you for Rias and Sarah for throwing in some guesses. You're in the right ballpark. Talking about the benefits of dried fruits. It is indeed. Courtney's right. Sarah's right. There's something with raisins. You're right. I'm feeling ready. Talking about the benefits of dried fruits is raisin awareness. I love it. All right, thanks everybody. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get started. So thanks for joining us. Feel free in the chat to let us all know where you're from, where you are in your journey to becoming a health professional, how far along in your training. That'd be lovely, just to kind of build community. So introduce yourself with like name and location and how far along you are. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, in the chat or the Q&A. Just keep in mind it can take time to get to all the questions. I'm hoping, ironically, since this is time management, that I will get to all those. Okay, my name is Amin Azam. I use he, him pronouns, and we are together here on the How to Get and Stay Organized While You're in School webinar. And I playfully joked that I'm busy, but not too busy to be fully present with you all. So I want to start with a land acknowledgement. I am coming to you from Oakland, California. These are the traditional lands of the Ohlone, Muwekma, and Confederated Villages of Lisjan communities. And this is a website that I strongly encourage you to consider exploring. It allows you to overlay a Google map with the sort of historical lands of the peoples that were here before us in different parts of the globe. And so I want to honor the elders of those communities who past, present, and future who call this place their home. Okay. Many of you have heard the expression "a picture is worth 1,000 words," and I wondered where that who actually originally said that. So I went to one of my favorite websites, Wikipedia. There's a Wikipedia page on this quote, and on that Wikipedia page, you'll see that Arthur Brisbane is an American newspaper editor, who speechwriter, orator, and public relations professional, who is the original author of that quote. And so, if that picture is worth 1,000 words, I want to actually declare that an osmosis picture, in my opinion, is worth 10,000 words. So I want to just acknowledge my gratitude to the medical illustrating team at Osmosis, who do amazing work making these images to help me. And I use many of their artwork in this presentation today. So acknowledging the illustrator team. Okay. So let me tell you a bit about me. So the top row is my academic duties. I am an academic psychiatrist my entire career. I run actively psychotherapy groups for patients with chronic medical conditions. So that's anybody with active symptoms, no cure. I'm also on faculty at the UC Berkeley UCSF Joint Medical Program, where I teach second-year med students. I'll be working with them this afternoon, in fact. And I'm a half-time simulation educator at Samuel Merritt University, all health sciences university, PT, OT, podiatry, physician assistant, nursing, nurse practitioner, nurse anesthesia students. So I have the privilege of working with those students. And on the bottom here is my disclosures. So I do receive about 10% salary support from Osmosis for my work. And I also receive equity shares from another ed tech health ed company, Patient Communication Simulators. Fundamentally, I'm never leaving academia. I really love working with students and teaching. But I also believe that a lot of innovations in health professions education are happening outside of our ivory towers, in some cases faster than inside. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to bring that speed of innovation to health professions education and lean in with my academic rigor. Okay, so I'm going to invite us to be interactive from the beginning of this talk. I'm going to ask you all to put in the chat what your highest priority goal is for coming to this. You registered, but then you actually bothered showing up. So that means that you thought this was going to be valuable for your time. And so please, in the chat, put down what your highest priority goal is for coming to this session. And I'm going to count down to 10 just to give you 10 seconds to type that in. Awesome. Keep typing them in. I'm seeing a lot of, obviously, time management, schedule management, jujitsu, as I call it, managing your time as a busy medical health professional student, and coping with the challenges of academics ahead. So I want to encourage you all to be reading those while I talk. Use your time effectively, and feel free to build community into that chat. So if any of you already have some of your own advice for other peers in the group today with us, I want you to feel free to use the chat in that way. So effectively, I want us to be accountability buddies and make sure that I try to address your needs. And you all can also help me in helping address your needs. Okay. So let me tell you about how I planned to structure our time together. So on the left is the agenda and the sort of different elements we'll cover in order. And on the right, like any good educator, I always want to put learning objectives. So it helped me frame the topics that I've sort of planned and frame these slides, but also just so that you're aware of what I think we're going to address. So I'm hoping it will understand key principles of the learning sciences that you can apply in your experiences in health professional schools. I want to give you my best practice advice from my years of experience. And then we'll talk about several Osmosis blog pieces that I think will be informative and helpful long after this session, and that you can read, or maybe you've already read some of them. Okay, so first thing was a land acknowledgement and my disclosures and the framework. Check, we did it. We're ready to move on into learning sciences. All right. So some of you are familiar with this expression that when you go to health professional school, I saw somebody was doing their PhD, so the same thing applies there. The volume of information that's coming at you that you're supposed to absorb is like drinking from a fire hose. It's just massive and fast and hard to keep up. And so on day one, you are totally ready. You're excited. You're thrilled to be in this health professional school. You wouldn't be there if you didn't want, ideally, to become that profession. And the challenge with drinking from a fire hose, as you all know, is that it's really hard to do, and you're done drinking and it keeps coming at you. And so I have just artificially suggested that by 10, you're drenched and soaked and overwhelmed. I think we could pick any number of days into the long journey of health professions and say that you're going to hit this wave at some point along the way, right? And so if we accept the drinking from a fire hose metaphor, that doesn't necessarily make it any easier, right? So what do we do? Fine, great, metaphor, fire hose, fine, I'm drinking. How do I apply that to my life? How can I prevent myself from being overwhelmed by that tsunami wave? Okay, so I'm going to start with some extremely practical tips. So, and those are from Osmosis, from the Learning Sciences videos. So I'm going to show you where those are for those of you that subscribe to Osmosis. So many of you, if you subscribe to Osmosis, you're familiar with this screenshot. You're going to go to the videos on the top left, and then you're going to have a beautiful distribution of videos around the foundational basic sciences, organ systems, licensing exam review, and then on the right side, the clinical sciences videos. But many of you may not know, if you scroll up a little further at the bottom of that screen, you're going to see the featured series on the top, on the bottom left here. And there's a beautiful series called Learning Science. When you click on the Learning Sciences video series, you're going to see at least 10 videos around the science of learning. And I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots of some of these. We won't be watching them during today's webinar because you can watch those on your own, at your own pace, and pause and stop them as you go. But let me just show you some screenshots of some of them. So here's Rishi Desai, the Chief Medical Officer, talking about how to study smarter. And so he talks about the where and what to study and what you're trying to achieve during the time you're actually studying. So setting some study goals for the actual session when you're sitting down. Here's a video about cognitive load. This one comes from my colleague Sean Tackett at Johns Hopkins and the Osmosis team, of course. And here we're talking about this concept of cognitive load. So there's this notion that we have short-term working memory and long-term memory, and we need to sort of intersperse our skills across these aspects of our brain in order to get it to sink into long-term memory and stay there. And so what the cognitive load video does is talk a lot about how to minimize extraneous cognitive load that isn't useful for learning, and that will actually reduce your retention into the long-term memory, and talk about strategies you can do to maximize the appropriate effort you need in order to move it from short-term to long-term. A really quick example here would be phone numbers and memorizing phone numbers. There are reasons why they're always in the 3-digit or 4-digit, followed by some interrupted sort of dash or period, followed by 3 or 4-digit thing, because cognitively, longer digit spans are harder to memorize. But if you break them up into the 3-chunk, 4-chunk, you're much more likely to retain it in long-term memory. So that's cognitive load theory. Third video here is memory palaces. So a lot of us are familiar with the concept of how do we visualize something that can help something burn into our memories with in some cases, what might feel like a preposterous palace you build out of like weird things that are atypical. The metaphor, the one I've always heard of is like thinking about an egg and throwing an egg on a ceiling. Nobody throws a raw egg on ceilings, but if you visualize that raw egg on the ceiling for a particular side effect of a particular medication, then every time you think of that med, you're going to think of that egg on the ceiling. So this memory palace video goes into the strategies for building your own memory palaces that can be much easier to import and retain in your long-term memory. Here's another video. This one's around the testing effect. Here, I'll just comment that passive learning ain't gonna work, especially with that fire hose thing. And what's really gonna work is moving us towards active learning, where you're actively thinking, struggling hard during the studying, and not merely highlighting or rereading or rereading things you've already read. So this goes into this notion of how you can lean into the testing effect. Formative question banks is a great example of how you can do that to test what you do and don't know, and to go right to your learning edge. So you maximize learning. Spaced repetition is another fabulous concept in learning sciences. So the red line here is demonstrating when you learn something, from the day you learn it, you're starting to forget it. And then if you bolus yourself with some sort of repeat sort of exposure to that thing you learned, then you'll relearn it and then forget it slower, and then relearn it and forget it slower, and then relearn it. And so the forgetting curve is inevitable for all of us. And what we really need to do is think about spacing and repeating the content so that we maximize the retention. So again, spaced repetition, phenomenal concept in learning sciences that we grossly underutilize for the most part. Okay, key message here in all of this. Probably took me maybe 7 minutes to explain those videos to you. All told, across all these 10 videos, it's less than an hour. I added it up. It's absolutely less than 1 hour video time. And I know you can watch these at 2x speed, so you can even go down to 30 minutes of your time. But those 30 minutes are disproportionately valuable time well spent. Because if you fundamentally learn how to learn, you're set for life. You're set for life, not just during the health professional years where you're in training and you're getting the diploma after your name, but you're set for the rest of your careers. Because as you know, health is a career of lifelong learning, no matter what. And so learning how to learn is forever. What you learn is going to change over time, over your career. Okay. I cannot speak loudly enough about the value of these learning science videos. And it's a large part of what I think brought Osmosis into the world, was leaning into these learning sciences as the med student co-founders built out the platform and brought on their teammates. Okay, just for those of you who don't subscribe to Osmosis, I want to explicitly acknowledge that these videos are also available on our public YouTube channel. And so I didn't check for all 10 of them, but I just checked for spaced repetition, for example, and here it is on the free YouTube channel. So for those of you that are not subscribers, know that they're out there too. Look for Learning Sciences on the Osmosis YouTube channel. Okay. All right, so the next thing I want to do is just move us a bit into the Osmosis blogs. So I am going to highlight 7 of the sort of material, 7 of the posts on the blog, and we'll start with one in the middle there. So this blog post, and Stephanie, my colleague, is going to post it in the chat so you have the link so you can read the full thing later. But this blog is entitled Everything You Ever Needed to Know About Year 1 of Medical School. So with author attribution to Osmosis teammates, I'm just going to read you a few facts from this. So curating an optimal study environment, curating an optimal study environment is a major factor in having productive study sessions. So really want to invite each of you to individually think about where you prefer to study, whether that's at home, the library, a coffee shop, or surrounded by a bunch of people and background noise versus in a quiet place where that background noise doesn't interfere with studying. Maybe you are somebody who likes to study alone, or you have study buddies because being with others helps motivate you to stay on track. So thinking about that element of your time management, extremely important. And then obviously there's a lot of water in that fire hose. They're going to need to study a lot, but studying for hours on end with no breaks is just humanly impossible, and it's going to lead to burnout. It won't help. You'll actually reduce your studying efficiency by trying to believe you can barrel through like that. Okay. Lots of other great tips for thinking about this for an early first year medical student, and I would say first year students in any health professional program. So a really good, easy read. Okay, second one I want to highlight a key feature from is this one here. And this one is Everything You Ever Need to Know About Year 2 of Medical School. So a quote from here, you'll need to take time to slow down on occasion and look for signs of burnout. Taking time to recharge is essential. And there are days when the most productive thing you can prioritize is your mental health and wellness and peace with some downtime. In fact, you're going to do better if you do that rather than trying to barrel through and lead to burnout. In my own sort of anecdotal experience, I learned during my medical school years that a cappella singing was very valuable to me. And so I joined the a cappella group. And so once a week we'd have rehearsals, and those rehearsals, that was time disproportionately well spent because I was not focusing on studies and I was focusing on something that gave me joy and passion. And then when I came back from rehearsal, I could more effectively study. Same thing with intramural soccer was something I enjoyed playing during med school as well. All right. So that's all I want to say about the learning sciences. I'm seeing some stuff in the chat. Thanks, Stephanie, for posting the links to those too. And we'll look at the Q&A in a little bit. So let me just move this out of my eyeballs way. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is multitasking, right? We've all sort of heard about multitasking, and we all use that word. And some of you may have heard that that there have been studies that have been shown that people can't multitask. And you probably think, yeah, but that's not me. I can multitask. I can do it. No one else can, but I can. I'm the exception to the rule. I'm here to tell you, we are all lying to ourselves. We cannot multitask. But what we can do is sequential single task. So in this picture, again, thanks to the Osmosis teammates, we have a busy nurse. I think this is a nurse. Let's just pretend it's a nurse. And they are addressing a lot of needs from a lot of patients. Okay, but if we actually sort of slow the clock down and watch what's happening here, I'm going to propose to you that they're not really multitasking. What they're doing is first receiving a call that says, let's say it's a request from a physician colleague around a medication for a patient. Okay, so they're taking this call, and then they're going to go look in the med chart to get the right medication from the sort of medication cart, and then they're going to go give the injection to the patient. And then they're going to go document what they did. Okay. So in reality, this is 4 sequential single task activities. And if they tried to chart while grabbing the meds, if they tried to be on the phone while giving the injection, if they tried to be bedside while they were talking to the clinician colleague or the physician colleague, they are less effective and going to feel more overwhelmed just because it's the way our brains work. And so I really, really want to encourage you to not think about multitasking as something you can do. I want you to think about sequential single tasking. Focusing narrowly, exclusively on the one task you're doing will actually be more effective for time management. And you'll actually do things faster, more efficiently, and know that you're actually not multitasking, you're sequential single tasking. Again, another one I can't praise highly enough. So towards that end, I want to talk to you about another way to manage your time, which is around what's called the Eisenhower matrix. Okay, so we can divide all tasks in life into important and not so important tasks. Similarly, we can divide things we do with our time as either urgent or not so urgent. Okay, so when you do that, you end up with this 2x2 matrix, the Eisenhower matrix, and all tasks, all things we do with our time can fit into one of these 4 cells. So I'm going to give you another 10 seconds and make us accountability buddies. I'm going to invite you to think of some examples for your own life that fit into each of these 4 quadrants. And if you want, put them in the chat, but I'm going to give you time to think about them. Actually, give you 20 seconds here. I'll count down to 20. I'm going to give you some examples. So let's say as a sort of busy clinician might be dealing with. So the top left, important, urgent. Get a lab value that is a critically out of the normal range for a patient. Let's say a potassium level is too low. So I'm going to need to address that urgently. It's important because it has a sort of imminent health related sort of consequences if not emergently addressed. Okay. In the important, not so urgent, top right quadrant, that would be, for example, out of normal range lab value that doesn't require an immediate intervention. So somebody's hemoglobin is low, but not critically low. Somebody's potassium is a couple notches higher than the normal range, but it isn't going to sort of affect the immediate healthcare management of that patient. Okay. So that's important, not so urgent. Bottom left, urgent, but not so important. Those are going to be things like all of the little fires we're putting out that don't actually have sort of life and death consequences. So you get a page from a colleague about grand rounds is about to start right now, and you're in the middle of seeing a patient that is more pressing or more time sensitive for your addressing that patient's needs right there in front of you. That would be like an urgent, not so important page. And then the bottom right, things that are not so urgent, not so important. So I think about things like leisure time. For sure, I need time in that, right? But I don't need to be looking at my social media Twitter feed right when I'm with a patient. But I do want to spend some time doing that because it gives me joy and fulfills me. So that might be a personal life example for a busy clinician. And again, we might think of others. Okay, so if we agree that all 4 of these quadrants are real, and let me just say, you can divide them into your personal domain and professional domain. You can keep them separate, it doesn't matter, but it applies to all of those domains, right? So how much time should we spend in each quadrant? I invite you to think about that. So by definition, those important, urgent tasks, we want to spend a good chunk of time up there because they are both urgent and important, right? So in the bottom right quadrant, not so important, not so urgent. I'm not saying don't spend any time. Of course, we need leisure time, for example. We need time on those things, sort of watching Netflix, whatever it may be, watching movies. Like I watched the Barbie movie this weekend. Great movie, not so important, not so urgent, but I enjoyed it, right? So definitely need some time for leisure time for sure. But what about this opposite sort of the urgent, not so important things? These are those like putting out small fires that we tend to spend a lot of time doing, and they're not so important. They seem urgent, but they're not so important, right? And so we spend a lot of time there when really what we need to be doing is pulling ourselves away from this quadrant and up into the important but not so urgent tasks, right? And then we feel really good about ourselves because we're actually accomplishing things that are important and we're checking them off boxes and we feel really good about it. So the question then is, fine, all and good, but how do you apply this? How do you pull yourself from the bottom left to the top right in this Eisenhower matrix? I'm going to offer you 3 tips. Okay. The first one is to remove distractions. So turn off those devices, be in a space where you can focus. It's not by accident that our phones are designed to draw our attention to them. The designers of these apps know what they're doing to drag us in, but you have the power to push it away and focus or single task on the important, not so urgent tasks. Second thing is to give yourself interim deliverables. So with interim rewards for good behavior. So if I'm working on a grant application, I know that's going to take months. At the end of month 1, I'm going to reward myself with some, I don't know, like buy myself a treat because I accomplished that at month 1. If I need to study 12 things when I get through 6 of them, I'm going to give myself to treat of ice cream, let's say, or something else that gives me some comfort food or something, rather than barreling through all 12. And so interim rewards is really great. And then the third thing is accountability buddies, right? It's not by accident that people who want to exercise and go up to the gym are more likely to get to the gym early if your friend is waiting for you. It's because you're accountable for them. We're more likely to, it's because we're mammals by definition, we're mammals, so we're social creatures. We want to be around other mammals. That motivation to be with that other person can really help hold you accountable. So I love the term accountability buddies. Okay, so the key thing is to pull yourself up into that not so urgent important quadrant and to think about strategies to help you not be stuck in the not so important urgent quadrant. Okay. All right, towards that end, I use the word accountability buddies. So I'm just going to once again invite you to look in the chat. Look at some of the things people were trying to get out of participating in this. And if you have advice for them, I saw a chat about like some apps or tools you want to use. If somebody knows of some apps and tools that you really love and you want to share them in the chat with others, please do so, because that way we're building community here around strategies for time management. And I'm going to keep moving us ahead. Okay, so next on the blog, we're going to go to Morgan Deuce's post. Morgan wrote about studying smarter in medical school. Morgan says, getting through med school isn't just about working hard, but also working efficiently and managing your time properly. And we've all heard the horror stories of med students who study from early in the morning to late at night, 7 days a week. Those are the ones that I worry about, that are at risk for emotional breakdowns and or suicidality, and God forbid, actually completing suicide. I do not want any of you to be that student. And so I think Morgan has some really good tips in their blog post about studying smarter, not harder. Okay. And thanks, Stephanie, for posting that in the chat. The next one I'm going to go to is Percy's. I'll just point out all of these have been written a while ago and updated, so still relevant today for you all. Percy talks about establishing balance. And Percy says, the truth is, I need to interact and speak to my friends periodically to maintain happiness and avoid burnout. I've been more intentional and direct in letting my friends know that there are just certain time periods in which I just cannot be as available. It is absolutely okay to acknowledge that. Being a health professional student is part of what you wanted to be, I hope. And so that comes with navigating balance in life in ways where I couldn't do all the things I wanted to, or all the things I did in college during med school. I just needed to prioritize a cappella and soccer, like I told you about. But I couldn't do all those other things that I used to do. And that's okay, because we are working on that balance. And that means it's okay to do the other things that give you joy and spend time with your friends and happiness. Okay. That's multitasking in Eisenhower matrix. Next up, I'm going to move us ahead to advice from what I call the DC era. So there was the BC before coronavirus, and then the DC or during coronavirus. And we're in what I call the KAC now, or the kinda after coronavirus. We're definitely not out of the pandemic yet. We're moving towards endemic, but we're still seeing some flare-ups in different parts of the world globally. So we're not really out of the pandemic yet. And so, but during the DC era, I had the privilege of partnering with Osmosis teammates to produce a couple of videos. One here, for example, was managing students' mental health during public health emergencies. And I had some 4 key tips that I think are still relevant today. So these were my notes to myself. Acknowledge that providing healthcare can be stressful work, especially stressful during the pandemic. Do frequent check-ins with students. Highlight available resources, student well-being programs. Destigmatize mental illness and praise help-seeking behaviors as signs of healthy health professionals. Yes. Here's the second video I did on supporting educators' mental health during high stress periods. So this was for the faculty and staff at programs, or staffalty as I like to call it. Tip number 1, engage in self-care. Tip number 2, build and support your team and community of peers. Tip number 3, look for signs of burnout and seek help yourselves as health professionals. So I was really privileged to do some of this work with mental health well-being services for the frontline clinicians at UCSF at my institution that were really experiencing exhaustion and burnout during the worst parts of the pandemic. So look for signs of burnout, seek help yourselves. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength to ask for help. And then a third video was around mental well-being during social distancing. I still feel we got that wrong. It was not really social distancing, it was physical distancing, because we want to be socially interconnected even though we were physically far apart from each other during the worst of the pandemic. So like I told you, we're social creatures by definition, we're mammals. So we want to be around other mammals. We're not reptiles in that sense, right? So we want to maximize collaboration while minimizing physical contact. Third tip on that was to be attuned to your personal physical manifestations of stress. So I know when I'm stressed, I get low back pain. Some of you will grind your teeth or sort of feel it in your shoulders or tension, headaches, or whatever it may be. But you know your bodies. And so paying attention to when you see those signs and signals of stress, think about what emotional alleviating factors you can do. And then we can express love and caring through words, not touch. I mean, what I'm doing right now is expressing love and caring to you all through my words, even though we're physically, geographically dispersed around the globe. So, so why all the recycled advice, right? We're not in the DC era, we're in the KAC era. So I will just, my key takeaway here for this, because there's something consistent in what I'm saying in all of this, across all of these videos and all of what I've told you so far about time management, which is fundamentally, you are an imperfect human being. I am an imperfect human being too. And if we can accept this profoundly universal truth, everything else in life is just going to be so much easier, because we're not going to strive for perfection, because we can't. That's an impossible goal. I'm going to mess up. I've messed up. I've had sort of consequences with my patients where I have made errors that have had health consequences. And I am deeply sorry for those errors. And I work harder every day to not replicate those same errors. But I'm an imperfect human being, and it's okay. It's okay that I'm imperfect. And I want you guys to know that too. And when you accept that, time management itself is also going to be an easier task, because you're going to mess up with your time management sometimes, and you're going to learn and grow and maybe not make that same mistake again the next time. All right, so I really want to strongly praise acknowledging being fully emotional. I'm really pleased these days to see that stigma against expressing emotions has gone drastically down over my 22 years of being a shrink. So I want to give you some tools to express your emotions about being exhausted in health professional school, because that again will improve your time management. The first thing here, that's what I just said. Actually, if you take time to acknowledge your emotions, it'll increase your emotional intelligence, which is good for you, which is good for your patients, which is good for your classmates and your faculty and your staff, and you'll be more effective, and it turns out more efficient in your time management. And experiencing the full range of human emotion means being fully human. So I want to talk about the range of emotions that you're likely to experience during health professional school with a tool. Metaphor here, we've talked about reinventing the wheel and not to reinvent the wheel, right? So there's an ancient wheel and a more modern wheel. I want to introduce you to the emotions wheel if you're not familiar with it. I love it. Actually, you can see I've got one right here on my wall, an emotions wheel. So start in the center. In this wheel, you can divide emotions into 7 7 key emotions. If we play with the angry one on the right side and the red, angry can be subdivided into these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 subtypes of angry. And so if we go just on the top here, angry can be divided into letdown, and letdown can be further subdivided into betrayed or resentful. Okay, so humiliated, angry can be divided into humiliated. Humiliated can be subdivided into disrespected or ridiculed. Bitter can be indignant and violated, et cetera, around the wheel. Okay, so the further out the wheel you go, the more precise the term is. Here's another version of the emotions wheel. If you just type emotions wheel and do a Google image search, there's like hundreds of them on the web. Here's an emotions wheel, another one. So like sort of we're moving towards sort of much fancier ones. Here's one designed for children, and sort of spin the wheel and talk about what your feeling is and can you express that emotion. Useful for young people who may not have full capacities to put it into words. When I've given a talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, thoughts, feelings, behavior, and how they affect each other, I also use the emotions wheel. Here's another version of that. Here, so I'll just acknowledge it's really amazing. The human language is beautiful. Across all languages, there's a beautiful range of words to describe how we feel. And if you get precise here, it's really powerful in time management. So here's again another one for kids. And I told you, like, here's one that's playfully based on pizza. And then you've got posters of these. And so I already outed myself about having one right on my wall right here, right? So if I talk with it with my patients, I can pull it up and we can play with the emotions wheel. So I love it, love it, love it. And so I strongly encourage you to get in touch with your feelings and get in touch with the words of your feelings, because you can be very efficient when you say, I'm feeling insignificant rather than scared or fearful, or just fear, right, as the core root emotion there. So those are my advice from during COVID. All right, I'm going to go to some more wisdom from the blog. Next up is Abe Baker. Should have graduated by now. I think Abe is a former medical student, MD, PhD student. He wrote some tools for productivity in medical school and beyond. And Abe says, let's face it, we have a life outside med school. Hooray! I'm glad we do. We should. Some of us are working on research projects, have a part-time hustle, or improving our hobbies. So Abe talks about digital apps to help keep track of our day-to-day projects. And in this blog post, he talks about several of the ones that he loves and why. Like one, I think, is a Trello board, for example. So thank you, Stephanie, for posting in the chat so people can read Abe's favorite apps. Let's go next to Ian Manarino. Ian talks about how to thrive during clinical rotations and make the most of your time in clinic. So in this one, we focus on how to make the most of limited time in the clinic and hospital during clerkships. Many of you are aware that the clerkship years of medical training, the later years, the sort of when you're in nursing students are in clinicals, may be even less flexible around your time management, because you're oftentimes doing direct patient care duties that need to get done before you can be on your own studying or some of that leisure time. So keep in mind that every step you've made along the way has been progress. You've made it to the clerkships and clinicals, and never losing sight of that. And so Ian offers some key tips around how to manage time effectively during the clerkship or clinical years of health training as well. Okay, and one last one here, Alex Hurtado. Alex talks about reflecting back on the journey in medical school, so finishing up med school. And what I really appreciate about Alex's piece is the reflective piece. So it really does feel like one big family with classmates, and genuinely has enjoyed what he's been learning. And he says the human body is crazy, and it's truly mind-blowing to know how much it took for me to even be alive and to be able to share my experiences with you. So gratitude is a fabulous, fabulous emotion, and expressing gratitude is good for Alex, but it's also good for the readers of Alex's piece, because it helps them remember why they're doing what they're doing, why you're on this step of the journey, like the sidewalk. You see where Alex is on that sidewalk, walking out of medical school as he moves on to the next stage of his career. So just wanted to sort of, again, acknowledge the value of the blog posts here around community building. So check on that. But wait, there's more. I only highlighted 7 of the blog posts that Stephanie put in the chat. And so I just want to draw your attention to several others. So here's some advice from a slide deck around staying motivated as a health professional student. So solid routine is going to be extremely valuable because you have, because of the Firehose thing. Creating that productive environment, you got to know what works best for you. I can tell you just candidly, like during the pandemic, I bought a sort of a grill, sort of a gas grill. And sometimes I use it as a standing desk. I will literally put my laptop on top of the standing desk because it's nice for me to be outside. I get hungry smelling the charcoal, but it's work. It works for me as a productive work environment. Stay focused and diligent, and don't forget why you started. You want to help humans, other humans. You wouldn't be a health professional student if that weren't true. We need you. I'm really, really glad that you're amongst my future colleagues. Manage your stress by self-care routine, gym, diet, football, friends, Netflix. All of those are really important and valuable. Health promoting behaviors, especially. Yes, we can eat junk food once in a while too. Yes, we can indulge in substances, but we want to be sort of cautious and cognizant of how much of those, and keep the big picture, big image in mind, right? Like I said, we need you as the next generation of health professionals. I need you. I want you to be successful and to join us in the great privilege of serving patients. Okay, taking care of mental health as a med student. Srishti Sahai is a medical student in the Philippines. She's from India originally, but studying there. I think she's nearing her end of her training. She wrote this piece about taking care of her own mental health. And there's a metaphor she uses in there about the oxygen mask on planes. So if you're ever traveling on a plane and the oxygen masks fall, they always tell you to put your mask on first if you're traveling with someone else who needs assistance so that you can then help them. And I just need to say how fundamentally true that is. You cannot care for patients if you're not also caring for yourself first. So it's absolutely appropriate and wise to take care of your mental health and well-being. Here's another blog post around how to be a better med student. And the author of this one talks about the Pomodoro technique. This involves shifting sets and shifting what you're studying in 30-minute chunks and rewarding yourself with some sort of brief respites. It's not by accident that classes, when they're 50-minute lectures with a 10-minute break, or 50-minute mental health appointments with a 10-minute break. These are because we need those respites. And so this post talks about help from your friends, the importance of the social support for healthy behaviors. Again, another one I can't speak highly enough about. Appreciating that you need a community in order to be an individual clinician, and healthcare is a team sport after all. So acknowledging that and leaning into your community of support and loved ones, even who were people in your life before you're in health professional school and who ideally you want to keep in your life to support you, and you to support them as best you can while you're in health professional school. This one, Anam Syed, talks about seeking balance and finding your ikigai in med school. Ikigai is a Japanese concept which means a reason for being. And you can see sort of the goal is to be in the center of that overlapping Venn diagram. I can tell you that, again, another one, I have it right here on my wall, because I love this picture, and it gets me thinking about the pieces that I do every day as a professional, and trying to find that inner ikigai. And one of the things I really love is talks like this. And so that's part of my professional commitment to help other health professional students become awesome health professionals. So that gives me joy. Here's another one about developing your emotional intelligence as a health professional. So you can divide emotions into physical and psychological attributes. And this one talks about sort of the concept of emotional intelligence and how you can, by developing it, stretching it like the weights here, you build the muscles of emotional intelligence. And so strategies for doing that. Here's another one on the ultimate guide to wellness in your health professional program. On the left, you see exercise, sleep, nutrition, top, bottom part, social and family time, yoga, meditation, goal setting, all phenomenal good stuff. I don't want you to burn out. I want you to sort of thrive in healthcare. So we're moving from the bottom left, from the left guy, individual who's burnt out, to someone who's really thrilled to be in health professional training. Here's another one around recognizing symptoms of stress and depression in medical students and how to help your classmates. So beautiful picture here of throwing that life-saving life raft to a classmate who needs help. So I just can't say enough about how much your team, and we need you guys to look out for each other. Omer is applying in psychiatry, I believe. No, maybe he's not. He's in Israel, I think. I don't remember where Omer's going next. In any case, check. here are the learning objectives I was hoping that we would address today. And we can see the satisfying check marks to convince ourselves that we did attempt to address all of that. So we're going to go to your Q&A. I'm going to try to see if I can answer some of those questions for you. But like a good educator, I want to bring you back to what we were trying to do. So I invited you at the beginning to identify your highest priority goal for coming to this session. Invite you now to in closing, as I look at the Q&A and try to answer some of those, I'm going to invite you to, I do this with all of my students in all of my classroom settings. I ask them, what's one thing you learned today? It can be small. It can be the same thing someone else said. Or if that's hard to answer, you can think about what's one thing I will carry forward with me into my practice. Or you can think about one thing I remain curious about, because fundamentally curiosity is the environmentally sustainable seed for lifelong learning, and we are all lifelong learners. And so I'm going to leave this on the screen for a minute. Again, one thing I learned, or one thing I'll carry forward into my practice, or one thing I remain curious about. And in small group settings, I actually go around the room and everybody shares, and I have to participate too. But I always get to go last. So I will go last today with mine, but I invite you all to share those reflections in the chat. And I'm going to look at the Q&A to see. So feel free to, it looks like we answered some of these questions already. Thank you, Stephanie, my teammate, in answering the Q&A that were there. And I'm just going to look in the chat and see if there's other questions that I can address. Or why don't we do it this way? Put in the chat your reflections so everybody can see those. And in the Q&A is where I can try to tackle some of those. So I'll look at the Q&A while you all look at the chat. So having a real-time heart, trying to recover from burnout, which has affected academics in the worst way possible. Advice for that, you bet. Thanks for asking that question, for vulnerably disclosing that. So burnout is absolutely treatable. And I think the number one way to address that is to seek mental health professional support. So you have the explosion of mental health apps is amazing. Some of them include sort of synchronous communications with psychologists or social workers or psychiatrists, and seeking that help, prioritizing that time to talk about burnout is a treatment strategy for beginning to address it. If people are further along in their professional sort of lives, thinking about, again, Ikigai and what are my priorities as a profession. So I finished my training, I'm burning out as a clinician. Maybe this clinic is not the right fit for me, or maybe I'll back off of some clinical time and introduce some education time, or maybe I will accept a part-time job instead, so that way I'm making less money, but I definitely am not burnt out anymore, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of strategies. I think the key here is to be thinking about the sources and causes of the burnout, and being able to think and talk through that with other people. And sometimes mental health professionals are the right people to do that with. I'm trying to be very lazy in terms of getting work done, delay until I hit the deadline and get exhausted. Okay, so I will acknowledge that we are all different people and we are motivated by deadlines. It's not by accident that your professors will give you midterms and finals or quizzes regularly. There's that spaced repetition in those quizzes. When they count for something, getting up to that deadline forces you to study, and that motivates you to learn things. I think the key thing here for that person is to think about interim deliverables, and creating for you artificial deadlines, so that way those artificial deadlines are upstream of the externally delivered deadline. So if you want to make sure you don't get exhausted with the sprint to the finish line at the end of right before your exam, you're going to need to disperse your studying upstream of that by giving yourself a deadline with a reward or penalty if you don't. So that those penalties will really offset your laziness, so to speak, because you'll realize that you're causing yourself that frustration by procrastinating. Timer, I see sort of suggestions in the chat. I mean, in the Q&A about some suggestions. So I don't know if you all can see those. Tick, is somebody recommends Tick as a way to see tasks by calendar. And built-in timer and habit tracker. with a student discount. Pomodoro method, setting a timer. I love timers. I actually have sand timers that I will put in when I'm giving a talk. I'll put it in front of myself and flip it over so people and I can see the time together. We all can look at our own phones, but there's something nice about us seeing the mutual accountability of the sand timer. So because they're visual. So, you know, I know that's old school, but obviously setting a timer and letting people see the countdown is also good. Other stuff in here about recording and balance in school. Look, I love the comments that you're not alone and seeing that you're not alone and seeing others. Sorry, thanks for clarifying that the chat is private. I'm sorry for the miscommunication. So you may only be able to read your own chats. My mistake. Sorry, Stephanie. I'll fix that next time I talk. Okay. Let's see what other Q&A we can answer. Difficulty concentrating because even though you can remove your room, you need your laptop to study. Okay, you know that your laptop, you can turn off those distractions on your laptop. Ain't nothing stopping you from closing those other things. So even with email, there's ways to sort of have email not ping you. And no, it's really hard because all of these apps are 100% designed to draw our attention in. And so like, I get that we need to study with the digital devices, and I think the real key here is you are the person who controls turning them off. You really do have that power. Okay. Time.from learned how to, oh yeah, people are saying what they learned. So there are apps to lock you out of social media. Love it. Thanks, Marlo, for that posting about sort of yeah. I mean, I think it's funny. I will playfully say it's funny that we need apps to control our apps because really the control lies in us. But I know it's hard. I know because just like I've said a couple of times. So, but you are empowered here to sort of control your I want you to lean into the things you can control. Obviously, there's certain things you cannot control, especially when patient care duties prevent you from prioritizing personal life at times. So you can't control how long it takes to sort of do certain things or tasks, but you can focus on the things you can control. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes before we wrap up, and I give you back a few minutes of your time to be able to address other things. I think what I'll do is stop sharing screen. How much planning you recommend for a given day, week, etc. Okay, so there's a balance here between the time it takes to plan and the time it takes to execute. And so I think the strategy here is going to be to experiment individually and see how much time is optimal for you. So if we do this once a week, let's say, you're going to plan for half an hour on Sundays for your schedule ahead. And then the next Sunday, you're going to plan for 10 minutes. And you're just going to compare and contrast how that week went for you to see whether that was the right dose of planning versus the right dose of executing, for example. How do you deal with not having accountability buddies? You got some here today. Because you're in a health professional university or school, you are already not alone because presumably you have some classmates. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to begin reaching out to them to suggest that that shrink from Osmosis said that I need accountability buddies and I'm just looking to build community, and is anybody interested in working together? I think that would be another strategy. Tips for studying for students with maladaptive daydreaming. In that case, I'm going to suggest scheduling your daydreaming. I know that sounds weird, but one of the things that can be really effective is protected scheduled time to do exactly that. So you're going to do nothing else but daydream set a timer, 5 minutes, the next 5 minutes, then daydream. We're going to see what happens. And you can see whether or not that scheduled daydreaming time leads to less intrusive daydreaming when you're scheduling your studying. And then, of course, if it's one of those things where we're wondering about attention deficit symptoms, there's online tools you can look to get a sense for whether that's of clinical concern, and then or seek help from others to explore the validity of whether that diagnosis is true in your case. A master list. So there's another advice about master list of deadlines to hold it accountable. Check boxes. I'll just tell you, I love check boxes. I love crossing things off my list. I'm even at my stage of life when theoretically I shouldn't have checklists. I just love them. It's so satisfying to cross them off. I used to replicate my checklist from things I hadn't finished to a new checklist just so I could finish the whole checklist, even though I didn't finish everything on my task list, and move it to a new task list. So whatever works for each of you in that process of finding these strategies. Okay. All right, I think I'm going to close here, share a screen one last time with just to show you that I have to hold myself accountable. What did I learn today? So I learned that there was about 150 people that joined us today together. And I think I'm going to carry forward in my practice the idea of doing my best to build community even with a large group, and just how much one uses the chat to build community versus other mechanisms, right? The Q&A tool, other social media platforms to sustain community. And I remain curious about how much this will help you all in your future health professions journeys. I'll close just by saying thank you for joining us today. And I am grateful. I'm laughing at Mary's comment about all those tabs with my anxiety. You're right. I need to work on closing some of the tabs in my in my computer. Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you for being a part of Health Professions, and stay healthy. I'm looking forward to continuing to partner with you ahead.
Helping current and future clinicians focus, learn, retain, and thrive. Learn more